All right, ready to dive in. We're tackling language learning materials today.
Sounds good to me.
And not just textbooks or apps, though those are definitely part of it. We're looking at how these materials, all sorts of materials, are developed and evaluated.
Should be interesting. There's a lot to unpack there.
You said it. And luckily, you've got some awesome class notes to guide us.
Definitely came prepared.
I like it. So, first things first, your notes actually define language learning materials. Anything that helps someone learn a language. Broader than I would have thought, honestly.
Right. It's easy to get stuck thinking just like textbooks.
For sure. But we're talking real-life interactions, movies, even travel brochures, apparently.
Anything goes,
Yeah.
which is kind of the beauty of it, right?
Totally. Okay. But your notes also break things down a bit. You've got these 4 types of materials listed: instructional, experiential, elicitative, and exploratory.
Yeah, those are some key categories.
They are, but I'm going to need some help bringing them to life, you know? Like, what does experiential actually look like when you're trying to learn a language?
Okay, imagine this. You're traveling
Right.
and you're trying to order food or ask for directions. You're thrown into the deep end, but you're learning by doing.
That's experiential learning in a nutshell.
Exactly. You're living the language, not just studying it.
Love it. Okay, what about elicitative? That one sounds kind of fancy.
Not really once you break it down. Think role-playing in class or joining a conversation group. It's all about getting you to actively use the language.
So less passive absorption, more active participation.
Exactly. It's like you've got to use it or lose it, right?
Makes sense. Instructional seems pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah, that's your classic textbook stuff. Grammar rules, vocabulary lists, those foundational elements.
The building blocks. But you still need something to build with, right?
Right, and that's where the other categories come in. They bring those building blocks to life.
Okay, last but not least, exploratory. That one sounds kind of fun.
It is. Think of it like this. You're exploring a new city, but instead of a map, you've got a language learning app, or maybe you're chatting with locals, picking up words and phrases as you go.
Turning language learning into an adventure.
Exactly. Making it fun keeps you motivated, right?
Absolutely. Which, speaking of motivation, you highlighted something else in your notes that I found interesting: print materials. They're still relevant, even in this digital age.
It's true. I was surprised too at first.
Right. I mean, we've got apps for everything these days.
We do, but there's something about holding a book, highlighting, making notes in the margins. It's a different experience.
It's tactile, it's personal, and honestly, sometimes it's nice to just step away from the screen, you know?
Totally. And not everyone has equal access to technology either, so print materials are still essential for a lot of learners.
Accessibility is key, for sure. So we've established that language learning materials are a lot more diverse than we might initially think.
It's a whole world out there,
Yeah,
and we've only just scratched the surface.
true that. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's talk about how these materials are actually developed. That's where things get really interesting. Okay, so we've talked about what language learning materials are, but now let's get into the nitty-gritty of how they're actually made.
The behind-the-scenes stuff.
Exactly. And you know me, I always love a good debate, so I was immediately drawn to the section in your notes about the issues surrounding materials development.
There are definitely some big questions to consider.
For sure. Like, who gets to decide what actually is into these materials? Your notes mention learner needs, teacher preferences, administrative demands. It's like everyone has a say.
The balancing act, for
Yeah.
sure. Imagine you're a learner who loves interactive games, but your teacher is all about that grammar translation method.
Clash of the Titans. And then you've got administrators worried about standardized test scores.
It's a lot to juggle.
It really is. And speaking of juggling, your notes also touch on the question of WHO should be creating these materials in the first place. Should it be professional writers, or should it be teachers who are, in the trenches?
That's a tough one. On one hand, you've got professional writers who might be amazing storytellers. They can make grammar fun.
Which is a tall order, let's be real.
It is. But they might not have that classroom experience, you know?
Knowing what actually works with real learners, teachers have that firsthand experience.
Exactly. They see what clicks and what just doesn't land.
So ideally, you'd want both, right?
The best of both worlds.
Teamwork makes the dream work, as they say. Okay, but even the development process itself can be a point of debate. Solo expert versus a collaborative team. What do your notes say about that?
It depends on the scale, really.
Hmm.
A single teacher might create some supplementary materials for their class.
Tailored to their students' needs.
Exactly. But for a whole curriculum, you'd probably want a team of people.
Language experts, editors, teachers, the whole shebang.
It becomes this amazing collaborative effort.
Love it. Now, one thing you highlighted that I think is so important is the role of evaluation. Because we can't just throw materials out there and hope for the best, right?
Definitely not. I've
Yeah.
definitely used some language learning apps that felt like they were designed by aliens, totally out of touch.
The worst is like, who thought this was a good idea?
Right. And that's why evaluation is so important. It's about making sure the materials are actually effective.
That they work, they're engaging, they actually help people learn.
And that's where all those different perspectives come in. Learners, teachers, administrators, everyone needs to be involved in that feedback loop.
It's like a continuous improvement cycle.
Exactly. Always striving to make things better.
Okay, we've talked about the challenges, the debates, all the things that can go wrong when developing language learning materials, but your notes don't stop there. You also dive into some really exciting trends that are shaping the future of this field. It feels like things are moving in the right direction.
Yeah, there's a lot to be optimistic about. I think the field is finally starting to prioritize the needs of the modern learner, which is great.
Totally. And one trend that really jumped out at me was personalization, because let's be real, we don't all learn the same way, right? So how are materials developers taking that into account?
Well, imagine this. Language learning materials that adapt to your learning style, your pace, even your interests. It's like having a personal tutor right at your fingertips.
Okay, that would be amazing. No more cookie cutter approaches, no more feeling like you're being left behind.
Exactly. It's about empowering learners to chart their own course.
Love it. Now, another trend you highlighted was the use of real language data, or corpora. And I'll be honest, that one sounds a bit intimidating to me. What exactly does that mean?
It's simpler than it sounds. Imagine a massive database of authentic language, like real conversations, blog posts, song lyrics. That's a corpus.
So basically, it's like bringing the real world into the language learning experience.
Exactly. Instead of those stilted textbook dialogues, you're learning from how people actually speak.
Which, let's be honest, is usually way more interesting.
Definitely. And this ties into another trend that I'm really excited about, which is the focus on effective engagement.
Okay, I'm intrigued. That sounds like a whole other level.
It is. Remember that feeling you get when you finally understand a joke in another language? Or you can finally follow a conversation without getting lost. It's that aha moment, that sense of accomplishment, that's effective engagement.
It's like you're not just learning the language, you're connecting with it on an emotional level.
Exactly. And when we're emotionally invested, we're more likely to stay motivated, right?
Absolutely. Because let's be real, language learning can be tough. You need all the motivation you can get. Speaking of tough, though, you didn't shy away from some of the negative trends in your notes either. Like, what's up with this overemphasis on grammar? I feel like I've definitely fallen victim to that.
It's a common pitfall, for sure. Grammar is important, but it's only one piece of the puzzle. We need to balance it out with other skills, like speaking, listening, writing.
Because what's the point of knowing all the grammar rules if you can't actually hold a conversation, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And another concern is the trend towards activities that just aren't that challenging. Like, they might look good on paper, but they're not really pushing learners to their full potential.
They're not engaging enough. They're not sparking that curiosity.
And when learners get bored, they check out. It's that simple.
And then all that learning potential just goes to waste.
Which is a shame because everyone has the capacity to learn a language, given the right tools and support.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the big picture. We've talked about the good, the bad, and everything in between. But ultimately, what are we hoping for? What does the future hold for language learning materials?
For me, it all comes back to the learner. I envision a future where materials are truly learner-centered, flexible, adaptable. Imagine a learning experience that's as unique as you are.
Tailored to your needs, your goals, your learning style.
Exactly. No more one-size-fits-all solutions. It's about empowering learners to take control of their own language journey.
And to actually enjoy the ride. Because learning a language shouldn't feel like a chore. It should feel like an adventure.
Couldn't have said it better myself. That's what we're all striving for, I think.
To make language learning more accessible, more engaging, and ultimately more rewarding for everyone. And on that note, I think it's time for us to wrap up this deep dive.
Sounds good to me.
It's been a wild ride exploring the ins and outs of language learning materials, from dusty old textbooks to cutting-edge apps and everything in between. But remember, this is just the beginning. Keep those notes handy, keep asking those insightful questions, and most importantly, never lose that thirst for knowledge. Until next time, happy learning.